do.
Hi there, Tackler. Welcome to Disney Deep Dive, where each week we dive into the history, story, and details of the Disney parks. I'm Leah.
And I'm your ghost host. All of our guests are dying to meet you. We find it delightfully unlivable here. Should I keep going with the ghost puns?
If you could, oh my gosh.
I am
Host
Stefan.
with the most. Ghost with
And
the
it's Halloween. Well, it's almost Halloween.
Tomorrow's Halloween.
It's Halloween Eve.
Yes. We are a night early, but we did announce that weeks in advance and on the liveplace.com, which Dean hosts us there. So if you don't know that, check out the liveplace.com. And we are a night early because we have 3 little kids who will want to be trick-or-treating tomorrow when we usually go live. So,
yeah, we have children, so we go trick-or-treating.
Yes, it's fun, although we are in the Midwest. We are in Michigan, and it is supposed to be a rain-snow mix tomorrow.
Yeah.
Wish us luck, y'all.
That's how that goes.
Yes.
Yeah, last year it was unseasonably warm and nice.
Yes. It was the first time because we're both natives to Michigan, and it was the first time ever that either of us could remember getting to trick or treat, not being freezing, getting to do what you see in the movies where you're just going up to the houses and walking through a neighborhood. So it was really cool.
It was a regular Ernest Scared Stupid up in here.
Yeah. Yeah. If you are new to our lives, we do a live every single week called Disney Deep Dive, where, like I said, we dive into the history, story, and details of the Disney parks. We are doing a spooky October this month. So tonight we are talking
The Haunted Mansion.
The Haunted Mansion.
Which is capping off our month because obviously this is the spookiest attraction in Disneyland World, Tokyo, all about. So this is where we are ending it. Also, it was the most extensive ride.
This is, and usually we keep these, sometimes they've been shorter, but around about an hour is typically what we do. We're going to see. So it'll be interesting. And I do want to mention that we will hop over to the live chat. And if you are watching on the replay, let us know if you've ever been on the Haunted Mansion and in which park you have been on it. If it's a favorite ride of yours, we want to know about it. And let us know where you're watching from. If you're watching the replay or if you're watching live. Right now in the live chat, our friend Gigi is there. Hi, Gigi. Thanks for hopping on. And I remember you guys telling me about that. Yes. And then Ernest. Oh, yeah. Last year, I think we did tell you about that. And then Ernest Scared Stupid. Yes. Yeah.
We haven't watched that yet this year.
No, not this
year.
It
is a watchable every year. So let's start this off with our personal experiences with the ride.
Okay. My personal experiences are that every time I have been, and I've only been to Walt Disney World, which we mention every week, but I have been on the ride. So it's one that I have done. And I didn't grow up going every year or anything, but every single time that I've been in Walt Disney World, I have been on the Haunted Mansion.
Yes, as have I. Every time I've gone, I've been on the Haunted Mansion. It is one of my favorite rides. I love it. It's fun and awesome and just gives me all the happy feels every time I'm there. I have also only been on the Disney World version, which is funny because today we're going to be talking specifically about the Disneyland version. But they're pretty close. So it's not a lot of difference. I mean, the Disney World one is longer. That's about it. Starting off, the Haunted Mansion, in case you don't know, is a haunted house-themed dark ride attraction that opened at Disneyland in 1969. That is the simplest way to sum it up. It is a haunted house, which you'll find most carnivals and other places, fairs and whatnot, usually have some sort of haunted house themed place.
Through or something.
Yeah, not to this level, but they usually have something, and that's because it was always kind of a staple of those sorts of places. So we're going to start at the beginning. The idea of the Haunted Mansion came about before the concept of Disneyland had even really come into fruition. Walt had come up with a bunch of ideas for what he wanted as a park, and like I said, a haunted sort of attraction was always a staple of those kinds of places, so he knew he wanted to include some sort of haunted house attraction, and he made this known to all the people working with him.
Yes, and this was way back in 1951, so like we said, it opened in 69 in Disneyland, not Walt Disney World, but in Disneyland, and in 1951 1951, Disney legend Harper Goff, who was the set designer on Casablanca,
One of my favorite movies.
Yes, one of your favorite movies. We have a poster of it, a classic, and came up with the first known concept images for the mansion. So think about Casablanca. It's a visually stunning set, movie, everything. And so as part of an illustration of a Main Street setting with a Western village and carnival. So one of the first people involved worked on Casablanca. It's pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually not supposed to be Western Village. It's supposed to be, oh, what is it?
I read the teleprompter. No.
It's later in the script, but it's not Western. It's Victorian. The Victorian village.
That does make more sense.
Yes,
but,
and carnival. So they have like this Victorian kind of village, like nice looking area, and a carnival setting, and then off of like a crooked path, there was a street that led away from the main street, and it went up a church or by a church, and then up past a graveyard, and there was this rundown manor perched high on a hill that towered over Main Street, kind of like if you've seen like pictures of the Psycho house from Psycho, how it's like this like big Victorian era style house, up off with a path leading up to it, like high on the hill. That's what they were doing.
Yes. All I can think about right now is that you're gonna at one point, because Stefan does the scripts, he's just gonna put a bunch of crazy stuff in it and be like, let's see what Leah can read, you guys.
Just put a bunch of
like one of those
typos.
News, okay. Anyhow,
so the construction of Disneyland eventually began to go way over budget. Now this was originally in the plans. They had planned to have this in there, but they went way over the original budget. So the haunted house plans were put on hold.
Yeah.
They couldn't really afford to put it in, so they just kind of put it on the back burner, as they tend to do with things like this, and said, okay, save it for later. So 6 years later, Walt began planning his expansion of the park with New Orleans Square, and thought that the haunted house would be a perfect opportunity to put it in within this kind of realm that would really fit in well with the New Orleans Square theming. So he assigned Ken Anderson,
who, even if you don't know the name, you know, because that's the art director of 101 Dalmatians, Pinocchio, Snow White. So just a few, things you've never heard of before in the Disney space.
Yes. He gave him the task of coming up with a look and a story for the attraction. So he was like, hey, figure this out.
Yeah.
Ken had also worked on rides for Snow White's Adventures and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which, as we discussed in our fun fact spooky trivia episode, those are more of the creepy rides at the parks. And it kind of, Walt looked at it like, okay, well, Ken's worked on these rides. They've got some creepy elements. He can handle that. He has experience in that area. It's best to give it to him and he can figure it out from there.
Yes, and if you're interested in that, we do have a playlist that has all of our Disney deep dives, and that was earlier this month. So if you want to check those out, please feel free.
So Ken drew inspiration from homes in New England and the South to come up with the concept for the exterior of the mansion. The majority of the inspiration came from the Shipley House in Baltimore, Maryland, which if you Google that, it is the Haunted Mansion. It looks just like it. So in 1958, Ken sketched up his final concept of what the house was going to look like, and Sam McKim used the sketch as a reference to make the now famous painting of the Haunted Mansion. And the one I'm talking about is, if you look it up, Haunted Mansion painting, I guess.
Or art.
It's the one with the willow trees around it, and it's all kind of run down looking. It has the banisters out front. And it's the one that you see every time there's a thumbnail on YouTube for the Haunted Mansion.
Yes, and everyone loved the look of this design.
Except Walt.
Yeah.
Walt did not like the look of it.
Little problem there.
Walt's vision of Disneyland had everything looking pristine and brand new for all time. So a dilapidated old building would not fit the aesthetic he was trying to pull off. He wanted everything to look fresh and new and like had just been built and put up. He never wanted anything to look decayed or old or run down.
And that's what still carries through in the parks and things. People always talk about all the trash cans every however many feet it is, and all of those things. That all came from the very beginning, where Walt was very adamant because he didn't want that fair vibe where you've got popcorn spilled on the floor and you've got junk and he didn't want any of that.
Yeah, this wasn't going to be a state fair. It was Disneyland.
Yes.
It was magical.
Yes.
So Walt did like the style of the house. He liked what they were going for. And so he liked what Ken had come up with. And he wanted to stick with it. He just wanted to look clean and well kept, like all the other buildings in the park. And Walt didn't believe that a house had to look like run down and dilapidated. You know, it didn't have to look like it was going to collapse on you to be scary. And a lot of this inspiration for that idea came from the Winchester house. Now, a little off the beaten track here, but the Winchester Mystery House, if you don't know, it's a mansion in San Jose, California. And it was once the personal residence of Sarah Winchester, who was the widow of firearm magnate William Wirt Winchester, so Winchester rifles. The property and mansion were claimed to be haunted by the ghosts of those killed by Winchester rifles. So it was supposed to be a house haunted by lots and lots of ghosts. And it is said that Sarah believed that the only way to appease the spirit was to never stop working on the mansion. So if you've ever seen pictures of this place, if you know about it, you know how like crazy it is and like wild it looks. I've never been there. I would love to go there. I've only seen pictures, but basically,
I mean, you could go down an entire rabbit hole. You could spend a day looking at these pictures.
So basically, the idea is like the hammers can never stop. They have to keep building to keep the ghost appeased. So you've got like stairways that lead to nowhere. There are doors that open up into just empty space. Doors that open up to blank walls. It's a house that they just kept building, and they kept adding stuff just to add stuff, and none of it's really functional, and it's crazy. But the thing about this house is it looks nice. It's not like a run-down, old, creepy, haunted house.
Yeah, it's not like the holes in the floor and the wallpaper ripping that you
It's creepy. It's creepy because you look at like a stairway that leads to nowhere and you're like, why would someone build that? And then you hear the backstory. It's creepy because of that, but it still looks nice and new and it's well kept. So keeping this in mind, this is where Walt got his idea of like, okay, a haunted house doesn't have to look like garbage. It can look nice and still be creepy and haunted.
And so his quote is, "We'll take care of the outside and let the ghosts take care of the inside." So he'll keep the house looking nice, but then the ghosts can do their haunting and their spooking on the inside.
So as for the story of the mansion, Ken had come up with several different ideas. The first involved a sailor named Captain Gore, who lived in the mansion with his wife until she discovered that he was actually the notorious pirate Black Bart. And because she discovered his secret, he killed her and then hung himself, and the ghosts now haunt the mansion, I'm assuming along with other ghosts. That's pretty dark, especially for a Disney ride.
Yes, that's scary.
Another story was that the mansion was an actual haunted house that was shipped to Disneyland from the South, ghosts and all, and the ghosts just kind of came with it.
Came with the house.
They actually existed there. It's not much of a story, but I guess it's a background that gives it residence there.
Yeah, and then the next one, and I'll let you do it, but this is the one that I think would have been so weird. This one, when you told me this,
Yeah, it would have featured Walt himself as the ghost host. He wouldn't have been a ghost, and I didn't really. The timeline is sketchy on this. I don't know if they thought of this after Walt had passed or before.
Not,
I think it was supposed to be before, and he was just supposed to be the host, not necessarily a ghost host. But he would have hosted it, and then it would have had projections of him taking people on a ghostly tour.
Welcome you.
Yeah, just like going on a ghostly type of tour.
But yeah, like the
Maitre
butler
D.
or something. Yeah.
So these were a bunch of ideas. There were other ones. There was one that involved like a bunch of like, there was gonna be like a wedding party and the Maleficent, a bunch of like the evil villains were present.
Yes.
Lots of ideas came through. None of them caught on.
Yes, none of them. And so they went ahead with the ride without an actual exact story. It was just like, okay, there's going to be ghosts, there's going to be haunting. Let's keep going.
Yeah,
and that's
just
what
keep moving forward. So they moved on to the special effects that were to be involved in the ride. The very first concepts, much like Pirates of the Caribbean, or the very first concept, much like Pirates of the Caribbean, was to be a walk-through attraction. So like how Pirates of the Caribbean was supposed to be a wax museum.
I'd go,
This was supposed to be a walk-through, like, ghost house.
Yeah.
Which isn't, I mean, it makes sense because, especially at the time, all of the ghost houses that you would go into, the haunted houses, even to this day, if you go to like a fair and there's a haunted house, it's a walk-through haunted
it's one
house.
of those, the bars and the
it's
stuff.
not a ride. So they originally thought like, okay, we'll do this as a walk-through kind of feature. So in 1959, Walt tasked Raleigh Crump and Yale Gracie, who we've talked about many times before, as the team to come up with all of the special effects for the Ghosts and Ghouls.
Yes, and if you're interested in the pirates, that was episode 1 of Disney Deep Dive, and we go into a lot of detail.
Yeah, if you haven't watched that, you need to watch it because there's a lot of crossover here. We probably should have done this episode second to that one.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't have been on Halloween Eve.
It's not thematically appropriate.
Exactly.
So they worked out of a studio at WED, which is the name. I don't think we said this before. WED, W-E-D, WED is the name of the I guess company that they had before Imagineering was a thing. They were still Imagineers, but WED was the name of the company.
And whenever we speak about them, we say Imagineers, and they were, because it was the same thing, but it just wasn't. It wasn't what we know where we know Imagineers today.
So they worked out of a studio in WED, and that's where they were to try out their ideas and kind of set up this whole scene so that they could, try out how they were going to make these effects work in the haunted house.
Yeah.
They spent the entire year researching and tinkering and coming up with unique and original ideas, as well as using more old-fashioned tricks with their own little twist on them. One of these old tricks was something known as Pepper's Ghost. Now, this is something I actually knew about because I used to read old ghost books when I was a kid, and it's something that I had seen before. But basically, if you don't know what it is, it's an illusion technique that was kind of originated in 1862.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time, for like stage shows and stuff. And essentially what it is there's a device employed to stage the illusion, and it's like this optical beam splitter. And by beam splitter, I basically mean it is a pane of glass. So there's a big pane of glass. What you have is, like, the stage is here, there's a pane of glass in front of it, the live actors are behind the glass, and then what you have is other actors down, like, below, and the glass is kind of angled, and the glass reflects what they're doing, but it's like see-through, so it looks like they're a ghost, and then the actors on stage interact with that ghost. So when the person in the crowd, so you guys out there, are viewing it, it looks like one single image. It's incredibly convincing. Like, for like how simple it is and how old it is, it looks very, very real. Which we'll get into a little bit later when we talk about how they use it in the ride. But this is one of the things that they implemented in the ride, but just in their own way. And by their own way, I mean on a giant scale.
Right.
So within the year, Raleigh and Yale managed to create a mock-up of the entire attraction, and they showed it to Walt. So they had all of their different effects and creatures and things. They said, this is what we came up with. Yep, check it out.
That's what we're starting with. And he loved the effects and the ideas that they'd come up with. But at this point, they were still describing it as being a walk-through ride. And Walt didn't seem like that. He didn't think that that was the right fit. So then they decided, okay, scratch the walkthrough.
Well, because he wanted to have more control over the way people view the effects.
Especially with things like Pepper's Ghost, where you need to control how the people are seeing it so it doesn't ruin the effect.
Yeah, he wanted to provide like the best experience possible. So he wanted to have just more control. And if people are walking through, because it wasn't just a how many people you can get through the ride at a time thing, which, is the first thing people jump to. They think like, oh, he's just trying to get more people through the ride. It's more that he wanted them to see certain things in the right way so that they come off correctly.
Yes.
Because he was all about the experience, providing the best experience. I mean, if you go back to our Pirates episode, we talk about that at length, where it was all about showing people what they wanted to show them at the correct time.
Even Little Mermaid. I mean, a lot of the rides, newer rides, they're still doing this.
It's just to try to, so they can make it more of a movie experience than just someone like wandering through a ride and,
right,
getting lost or holding people up, stuff like that. So
would you get lost if you were walking around the Haunted Mansion?
I mean, no, but...
Well, I mean, like, on purpose, because you're so mesmerized looking at everything.
Like, jump into, like, the side thing. Just hide with the ghost.
I'm just tossing some ashes here.
So on top of this, they also had to agree... They had yet to agree on a workable story for the ride.
Yeah.
They had no idea what the story was going to be, what it was going to be about, what they were going to be saying with it. So at this time, they put the Haunted Mansion concept on hold so they could focus on other projects. So... construction on New Orleans Square, which is where this was planned to be, began in 1961 with work on the mansion starting in 1962, so a year later. And by 1963, the outside of the building, as we know it, was completed. And Walt wanted to move forward on coming up with what the interior of the attraction would hold, what it would look like, what they would have in there. Walt tasked his Imagineers with coming up with ideas for him to review for the inside of the mansion. So he was basically like, all hands on deck. All you guys come up with ideas, present it to me. Let me see what you have, and we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where Raleigh Crump comes in again. He showed
With
Walt
some bizarre stuff.
some designs for his version of what the interior would hold, and it included a lot of bizarre objects like coffin clocks, candlemen, which the candlemen are actually pretty sweet. It's like this melting candle guy. It looks really cool. Talking chairs, man-eating plants, tiki-like busts, living gypsy wagons or Romani wagons, and a mirror with a face, which kind of just sounds like Snow White, but I didn't see a picture of that. So no one really liked Raleigh's ideas. They all looked at him and said, this is weird and it's way too out there, which I'm pretty sure we talked about that in the Tiki room also. That Walt looked at Raleigh's...
hone it in,
Yeah, Walt looked at Raleigh's ideas and he was like, oh, this is too out there. It's too crazy. So this is kind of a constant theme with him, is he just kind of gets out there and makes all this crazy stuff. And
a creative genius, but they have to hone it in.
Yeah, you like it or you don't. But Walt looked at it, and after considering it over some time, he wanted to take his ideas and turn them into something that he called the Museum of the Weird. Which would have been sort of like a restaurant adjacent to the mansion, kind of like the Blue Bayou style in Pirates of the Caribbean. It would have like housed all this weird stuff. It would have been a restaurant they could go to. Good idea. But the idea never really came to fruition, and the Museum of the Weird was axed after Walt's passing. But some of Raleigh's concepts were worked into the final mansion in a way. The chair with a face, for example, and how all of the regular objects were made to look like they had like menacing faces. Those were all included, which we'll get into a little bit later. But around this time, Marty Sklar put up a sign in front of the mansion because it wasn't open yet, and people were starting to ask about it. So he put a sign up that said it was a retirement home for ghosts, and it was claiming that they had post-lifetime leases available now. So kind of a tease to what was going to be inside. It didn't allude to a lot, especially because they didn't have a lot panned out at this point.
Right.
But it was something.
But it was just left there though for quite some time.
Yeah.
Just that essentially. But then we come to the World's Fair, which we've talked about before, and we're going to talk about for a minute again because it really affects a lot of these attractions. Yeah.
So in 1964, progress in the mansion was once again halted. And everyone busied themselves with prep for the New York World's Fair. Now, we mentioned before that the World's Fair is where a lot of the technology was developed that would later go on to set Disneyland apart from other parks and just make their rides and experiences really, really cool and advanced. For the Haunted Mansion, this came in the shape of Ford's Magic Skyway. Now, this is what provided a solution to the issue of how to move people through the ride in a way that would enhance the experience. The way it worked for Magic Skyway is you would get into a car, like a Mustang or some other Ford car, and it was an actual car, and it would move along these tubular tracks. So there was a track like the width of the car tires, and it would move along the track, and then there was a tire poking out of the ground. Powered by this powerful motor that would keep it spinning, and that's what propelled the cars around.
Yes.
So there's one here, one here, one here, and it would just keep the cars moving at a steady pace around this track. So it couldn't go off the track, it couldn't go anywhere else, couldn't get faster, and that's what moved them all around the place. So they coined a name for this ride, which is the People Mover, which you probably know. So the People Mover was later integrated into Tomorrowland as a ride itself. That's all it was. It was a thing that moved people around.
And it still is a very, very popular thing.
Yeah. So it was then redesigned and updated as the Omni Mover. And that became when they used it for the Adventure Through Inner Space attraction. Now, the Omni Mover was basically they wanted to use the same idea, move people along a track, but also turn them and direct them to view a certain place. So
they're in control of what they're seeing.
Yeah, we talked about this in our Little Mermaid one because the Little Mermaid uses the Omni Mover system. And basically what it was is it's a pod on a post that moves along a track and then turns when they want it to turn. And because it's a little pod where it kind of cuts off your peripheral vision, You just see what they want you to see.
Yep.
So, which is what causes the movie-like experience while you're going through the ride. This type of transportation was exactly what the Haunted Mansion needed for several reasons.
Yes, it lets them have a high capacity ride capable of moving people through quickly. So they could move 3,200 people through in a single hour. And to this day, it's still one of the highest capacity rides in the parks.
Yeah, the only one that beats it is like the People Mover, which moves like 4,200 people, but all that ride is doing is moving people. So
that's all it's doing, right?
Yeah. So it is. I think like realistically, it moves like 2,800, but it's like on the list of like most people moving through a ride. It's like number 3, so they can move a ton of people through it. And second, they wanted to be able to direct guests' field of vision exactly where they wanted them to see, so they could have the effects pulled off in the correct way.
Yep.
And show things to people in the way they wanted to show them, so that everything looks realistic and convincing. And then they could pull off basically what Walt desired. He wanted people to see things in a certain way. So they copied the Omni Movers from the Adventure Through Inner Space ride, painted them black, and called them Doom Buggies.
Doom Buggy.
Which I love that name. It's so simple and silly.
It's so good though.
But it's such a good name.
Well, the whole attraction, which we're gonna get into all the pieces, but it is simple and good. I mean, it really is. Then we come to Walt's passing. So December 1966, Walt Disney passed away, and it was a sudden death. So that changed a lot of things with all of the rides and attractions they were working on at that time, because obviously it was a shock to everyone. Yeah,
and unlike Pirates, which was basically finished, if you watch that episode, it was mostly
Shameless
done.
Plug,
they just had to finish it up.
It's a good one, though.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of decision-making involved in it. They just had to finish what they were doing. Unlike that ride, Walt had yet to sign off on any of the ideas for Haunted Mansion, and they didn't even have a story yet. So they had like just little bits and pieces here and there, not a really fully realized idea. And now their leader was gone, and they had to figure out what they were going to do and how they were going to finish it. So because of their success on Pirates, Richard Irvine, who was in charge of WED at the time, he put Mark Davis and Claude Coates in charge of finishing the Haunted Mansion. Pirates of the Caribbean was a huge hit, and he was like, okay, you guys are basically mostly responsible for that ride. You guys finish this one. I know you can do it. Good luck.
And do it in a way too, because Walt loved Pirates. So do it in a way that's going to be like, okay, this is what have been
his vision,
right? That what Walt wanted.
So they found that they had differing visions, though, for what the Haunted Mansion should be. Claude thought that the success of Pirates came from the set pieces and the ambiance that was created by them. So he wanted to create a truly scary Haunted Mansion. He wanted like endless hallways, corridors of doors, lots of like numerous characterless environments. And you have to remember that Claude was a background artist. That's what he started out on. We talked before about how he had these like amazing backgrounds that he did in Pinocchio and stuff. So he believed that the space that these things existed in would make it what it was, not so much the characters themselves.
Yes.
And Mark, on the other hand, he was an animator. He was a character designer.
A different specialty.
Yeah, he designed all of the pirates. And the Pirates of the Caribbean. So he thought that is what made it successful.
Yeah, well, of course. They both think that the thing that they do and care about is, of course, what makes something great.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, what made it great is what I did.
Right.
So he believed that a more fun and comedic experience, because the pirates he made were like fun, happy,
funny,
carefree pirates, that would spell success for the attraction. He wanted it to be more of a fun, like lighthearted haunt adventure.
Yes, and ultimately they decided to come up with a compromise.
So they were going to make the ride half like dark, foreboding creep show and half ghostly fun entertainment. Yeah. And I saw a few things here that said that Atencio had a lot to do with that he said, okay, you guys can't decide, let's just combine the two. And then I saw other stuff that said that they came up with it on their own. I don't know what the truth is there, but that leads us directly into the script and music, which Atencio had a ton. Well, basically, he did all of it.
All of it, yeah.
So Atencio, who provided the script and some of the music for Pirates, was brought in to do the same for the Haunted Mansion. X looked at all of the random bits and pieces the Imagineers had created and thought there had to be a way to like tie it all together because even though they had decided to compromise and yeah, it's half happy, half scary, they still didn't have a story. There was no like through line in the entire ride.
Right. And Pirates, though, didn't really have a single story going through, but it all flowed together.
Yeah, it didn't have a story per se, and we talked about that. Like, there's a lot of theories about it, but everything flowed nicely. It went in like one thing went into the other nicely.
Yeah.
It didn't maybe make sense in terms of like, oh, this means this means that, but it still works when you're going through it.
Yeah.
So, drawing inspiration from the haunted retirement home sign in the front of the building, X ran with the idea of a ghost retirement home, and this solved the problem of all the randomness because it meant that ghosts and ghouls from all different walks of life would find a home in the mansion. So you could stick literally any idea. You come up with any idea for a ghost or a weird like haunt or monster, and the explanation is, well, this is a retirement home. They all just come here.
Yeah, after they die, they come here.
Yeah, so I mean, really, it's one thing just led to another, but it was a brilliant execution of like, oh, here's how we solve this problem. No matter what idea you guys come up with, it works because it's a retirement home. Yeah. All sorts of random people end up in retirement homes. So that's what this is. So from the beginning, the idea of a ghost host in one form or another existed. I mean, from the very beginning with the ideas of Walt hosting it, there was going to be some sort of host kind of guiding you and directing you through the entire ride. So X kept it in the script. Originally, he had wanted the host to be a raven who would follow you throughout the mansion, narrating the entire ride to you.
Very Evil Queen.
Yes.
Esque. Yeah.
However, the raven would be lost among the large, intricate sets.
Or Maleficent, I guess, would be more Maleficent.
People would have no idea who was talking to them.
Right.
Now, there is still a raven that follows you throughout the ride. He's in, I think, like 4 or 5 different places. So it is there. I don't know if they put that in there planning on the raven to be the host, or if they just kept it in as a nod to the idea, but it's there. So this was a problem with every concept they had for the ghost host. No matter what they came up with, it was like, well, no matter where we put this thing, it's going to be hidden, and you're not going to know who's talking to you because it's not obvious enough. So their solution was to simply turn him into a disembodied voice, which was perfect because it's a haunted house. So you can have a disembodied voice. And this voice was voiced by Paul Frees, who you may know as the original Ludwig von Drake. And he also did the Dead Men Tell No Tales script speech thing at the beginning of Pirates.
Yep.
With the talking skull, the ride. So the final show of the Haunted Mansion was again inspired by Pirates. As you go through like the graveyard and stuff at the end, it's kind of, you know, you can tell it gets more like happy and cheery and fun.
Lightens up. You're almost through.
Yeah, it definitely lightens up by the end. And as that ride sends you off with a fun song and keeps things light, X wanted the mansion to end the same way, so he wrote the song Grim Grinning Ghost.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Grim Grinning Ghost.
So he wrote the lyrics, and Disney studio composer Buddy Baker helped compose the music, and they came up with Grim Grinning Ghost, which basically plays throughout the entire ride in one form or another.
Yes. So then after 10 years of planning and development, the Haunted Mansion finally opened. And that was to the public on August 12th, which is your birthday.
Yes, it is. 1969.
Not on
but it opened on my birthday. So
it's pretty cool because I love that ride. Yeah.
Yes. They did have a soft open before. Then you see like varying dates because they had like a soft open where like employees could ride and stuff. But the official opening date was August 12th. So
his birthday.
On my birthday.
It's a good day.
Yes, makes it even better.
You guys can guess the year of his birth in the comments of the live chat.
Ah, yes, there you go. The attraction was an immediate success. Everyone loved it, especially after waiting so long. 10 years. I mean, that's the sign had been out front in the build, like the sign like, oh, coming soon, and they had been advertising for it for like 6 years. So it was a long time coming, and people were excited. Instant hit. And it did help Disney recover from like Walt's untimely death, because after he passed, it was one of those things where it's like people didn't know. I mean, even people visiting, they're like, well, he's gone. Like, is this just going to fall apart? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, everyone lost Walt. It wasn't just like the Imagineers. Like, everyone lost him.
Everyone's waiting to kind of see what's going to happen.
So they're all waiting to see, like, are things going to keep going the way they were? What's going to happen? So this definitely helped.
Over to the live chat. I think it would have been cool to have a raven be your guide if you don't see it. The point is to be eerie and creepy. Yeah, I like the raven concept. I think, like, I just picture Maleficent, which we have not seen the new one, but definitely want to. But it is really creepy.
Ooh, actually, one quick thing I want to mention about the Doom Buggies is that with the voice, like, these days we obviously take it for granted. Like, okay, there's a speaker in the car, you hear it. At the time, this was a brand new, like, innovative thing. And the way it worked is actually really simple and really cool. It had, so there's, I can't remember how many cars, but the Doom Buggies are in like sets of 20.
Yeah.
And the first car is powering all of the rest. So the first one powers the other 19. And the first one has an alternator on it that powers a motorcycle battery that powers the rest of the cars. And as the ride's moving along, it hits like, well, originally it hit like different like infrared stations that would trigger a recording to play over an FM receiver that was in the car over a certain ride. So as you like basically like cross these beams, it would trigger the different voice to play over each one.
Cool. That's really cool.
And they still, well, the alternator and the battery, it still works that way. They now use like RFID chips.
Right.
So
that's awesome.
they just like pass over the chips and it like triggers it. But yes, it's super cool and very innovative the way they had it, they created that.
Also, very close, 86. He was born in 86.
Oh yeah, you're very close. Okay, so usually we do like updates and refurbishments and fun fact lightning round and all that. Today, we are combining all of those into a single
pasta
section. A walkthrough pasta, where we talk about the ride, because this ride's had a lot of updates, a lot of refurbs, lots of things done to it. And I forgot to mention that the attraction opened at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World in 1971, opening day. They planned for it to be there, and it was there.
Yeah, and because it was so successful, so they knew they were going to put it.
And Tokyo Disneyland got theirs in 1983 at their opening. I mean, I've only been to the Magic Kingdom version, but I gotta say the Disneyland version is probably my favorite. It looks wise from the outside. It looks super cool.
It's cool to look at the side-by-sides. Like, you can do this in terms of the ride, like the point of view ride on videos. And then you can also do, of course, just looking at the outside. And it is neat to pull them up and see the slight differences. Yeah. The ride itself is, I mean, it's all really cool. But as far as the outside exterior, because they're all very different, I like that southern look with the tall, like, banisters. And it looks like how, when I picture a haunted house in my mind, like, that's what I think of. So we're going to take you through step by step through the mansion and talk about the updates and things that have happened piece by piece and where they came from and little details and fun facts. Yeah. I'm going to do the first one because I like this one a lot. It's starting with the outside. The plants and all the foliage were picked specifically for the Haunted Mansion. So they were picked for the exterior of the mansion, and they were chosen because they're inherently spooky, right? They're inherently creepy. You think about vines and creepy plants and weeping cypress trees and funeral trees. And so it gives it that vibe from the outside.
Yeah, so they were very conscious about how they were going to like plant things around it to make it look super duper creepy and just add to the ambience.
And they grow, of course, as plants do. But it works. Like, they knew, they had the forethought, as they do with all their attractions, but even down to the plants that they planted for the ride.
Yeah, because they had to be maintained, because they knew that Walt wanted the outside to look nice and kept up and like it was a new place. But they still had to look creepy. So a lot of thought went into what they would put outside of the building. Also outside, there was a pet cemetery that was added. And we're talking specifically about California here.
Fact, yes.
Because there was a pet cemetery in Florida as well. But the pet cemetery was added in the 1980s when the queue was rerouted to go around the south side of the building. There was like a little like mausoleum thing you would walk by, and then they had pet cemetery. Well, then the queue was changed again that stopped it from going around that side of the building and would keep guests more on the north side of the building. So the pet cemetery, it wasn't moved. The actual original pet cemetery is still in the back. You just can't see it because you can't access it. But they recreated it in the front of the building, in like the front garden in 1993. And they added some more stuff to it, so it's more like robust and
yes,
looks really cool. Also outside, there is the horseless hearse in the front of the building.
Very cool.
The hearse itself is an actual antique dating back to the Victorian era,
Yep.
and it was added to it was bought from auction, and it was added to the mansion in 1995.
And we've mentioned this many times, but that's again a common theme. Disney will pick actual antiques. They will go and buy things either at antique shows or even in other countries specifically for their rides so that they're properly curated.
Yeah. So that they're authentic and real, and they don't have to spend time trying to recreate it. They just buy the real thing.
Yep.
And the ghost horse in the front, because obviously the saddle looks like it's riding something. The ghost horse was the idea of Imagineer Tony Baxter, who we've talked about many times.
Many times, yes.
So, entering the building, you wait in the foyer for the pre-show. Well, and by pre-show, I mean you just kind of like hang out in there.
Yeah, but it's all themed. It's cool to be in there.
And that's before you enter the portrait room or the stretching room. And this sequence of rooms was actually added to get guests around the Disneyland Railroad tracks, which actually runs like straight through the building. So it runs between the front of the mansion and the large showroom where the actual ride is held. So if you've seen like aerial pictures of the ride, like the first time I saw this, it blew my mind because the mansion itself is like a little like this, and then the ride portion that houses the actual ride is like this giant thing behind it. So, but it's perfectly hidden. Now in Disneyland, what they did is they said, okay, we'll put the mansion here, and then the train will run like behind it. So the train was going behind it. So,
and again, this is something that they've had to do before for logistics. Things where there might be a basement or there might be, they have to work around things.
Yeah, same thing happened with Pirates. When
yes.
You went in, you had to get through the basement into the actual showroom.
Mm-hmm.
They're working in a confined space here, and they have to come up with ideas. And necessity is the mother of invention, apparently, because they come up with all this great stuff to get you to where you need to be. So. The stretching room, this whole sequence that you go into, or portrait room, as it's also called.
Well, they're stretching portraits, so portraits.
Yeah, it's actually an elevator, because what you're looking at is like the railroad's here, you enter the building here, and the elevator takes you down, and you go through, and then up into the ride.
And it's very similar at Disney World, too. You get in, and it starts to go.
So what it does is it's an elevator that moves you like 18.5 feet down, like below ground, and to hide the elevator, because obviously they didn't want people getting right into an elevator in this house, Imagineers came up with the stretching portraits idea to make it seem like the room was getting taller rather than the elevator like moving you down. It was just supposed to like blow your mind. Each of the portraits, and we actually have one of these in like a miniature.
Oh, we do. And it's funny because we, of course, put it out at Halloween, but we've left it out basically year round. We both really love it. It's cool. It's got
actually, here, keep reading this. I'll get it. Keep reading.
Okay, keep reading. All right, so the portrait room is in the elevator that lowers you down. And one thing that I think is really cool is they were all hand painted by Mark Davis, who, again, is someone who we mention all the time. Totally brilliant. Oh, good, he's here. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so here it is. We'll show you that, and then I'll explain the paintings.
So it starts here.
Yep.
And then it goes and it's awesome. I want to get the whole collection so we can like hang them all up.
Yes, we got this in a Mickey Monthly. Yeah, a Mickey Monthly box last year around this time, and they are really neat. It's a cool canvas and a little black frame. This says $27.99 Disney Parks, and I don't know if they still have it on the website, but we do. We love them. It'd be cool to get all of them.
Yeah, I want to get all of them to hang up so we can have like a whole gallery of them. But this one is fun to put up.
Quite a bit of Haunted Mansion merch. We've got Funko Pops. I've got a pin, Madame Leota. I'm trying to think what else we have.
My mug.
Oh yeah, Stefan has a mug.
Yeah, a lot of Haunted Mansion merch.
Oh, I've got my ears that I wore last week. Anyway. All right.
Let's see. Where did you get on this?
Oh, I was starting to talk about Mark Davis. canvas. So they've been updated many times, but they were originally hand painted. They had to update them, of course,
Oh yeah,
throughout
he
the
hand painted
years.
all the original portraits, but because the way they work is it's a rolling picture. So like as it moves, the picture is rolling out, and it
Mm-hmm.
would roll out and up and stretch like hundreds of times a day, so it would wear out.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah, the canvas, like where the paint was.
hmm at the time, because we're talking about this was like the 1969, there were not machines large enough to copy and reproduce the portraits. Like there was no copy machine that you could go like scan it
Not until the 80s.
and yeah, and
Yeah.
then print a copy. So they were for a decade. They were every time they would wear out, they would have to have someone come in and paint a new one. So you can see online if you go check it out. There are lots of comparisons where you can see the different versions that have existed.
Mm-hmm.
The ones we see now, though, were created in the 80s, which is when that kind of technology actually became available. As soon as it wasn't available,
They jumped on that.
immediately copied all of them
Yes.
and said, none of this.
Yeah.
And they've been reproducing them from those copies ever since.
Mm-hmm. But it is so cool. They were originally hand painted. That's
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. So when you leave the room and enter the portrait corridor, there is an actual antique Victorian wallpaper that was purchased by Walt Disney himself. So this is Disneyland.
Yeah, so the wallpaper that's on the walls, you can tell it's like it's got like a fuzziness to it. It's like really like robust looking and
Mhm.
like kind of heavy looking. And that was purchased by Walt. He found it. It was an antique, and he said, "I'm getting this. We're putting this in the Haunted Mansion."
Yeah.
And they eventually did use it.
Which a nice nod once again to him.
hmm The bus at the end of the hall. No, now you go through the hall just to mention this, and the portraits. You know, the lightning strikes, and then you can see like the skeletons and stuff that show up behind the paintings.
And if you don't know what we're
Cool
talking about,
effect.
pull up a point of view of the ride if you haven't been on it, or if
Yeah.
you don't know the ride well enough to know all these details, which I understand that as well. Pull up a point of view, watch that, hop back here, and it'll all make a lot more sense. But
Yeah, it's a lot of fun just to even watch it.
mm-hmm.
But the bus at the end of the hall, they were created by Raleigh Crump and Yale Gracie when they were working on all of the effects, and they got the idea by looking at a hollow mask of Abraham Lincoln. Like it was like a face.
I don't know why I think
mask.
that is so
It was like sitting on a
funny.
table. So they saw like the inverted portion of it,
Yeah.
and they noticed that when they walked by it, that the eyes would just follow you everywhere you went, like no matter, like kind of like Mona Lisa style, like
Yeah.
no matter where you went. And I've seen the Mona Lisa, and she follows you everywhere.
And she's
It's
a lot
creepy.
smaller than you think.
It's like this big. Like Mona Lisa
It's a
is like
stamp.
literally this size.
I haven't seen it in person. He has.
It's underwhelming. It's impressive to be in the presence of that kind of art, but it's also underwhelming because you expect it to be like this. Like you can't see my hands. Like giant, but it's the size of like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So
Okay, I'm
underwhelming.
gonna hop to the live chat, and yes, you think so? It says the most random fact ever, the one about Abraham Lincoln, because yes, it is very random, but true and very cool to see kind of where they get that inspiration.
Yeah, so back on task, they noticed that the eyes follow you everywhere you go.
Mhm.
And so what they did is that these busts that you see, the faces, it looks like they're like 3D poking out. They're actually inverted. And
Mhm.
they're lit in a way where it looks like they're the 3D, but because of this, they follow you everywhere you go. So
Yep.
it's really cool. Now, the room where you get on the Doom Buggies was intentionally left mostly empty and like really dark and just kind of like covered in cobwebs and stuff to simulate entering the dark abyss of the spirit world. I didn't get that from it. I just thought it looked really plain and boring.
Mhm.
And this is coming from someone who really loves this ride, but getting on the Doom Buggies, I was like, a portrait here would be nice or something. I
Right.
don't know.
It's kind of, I don't know, and I get it, but it seems like they could do something, some kind of an element that wouldn't take away from the rest of it, that wouldn't overshow the rest of it, you know, or overshadow the rest of it,
Yeah.
but something to
Like, I get what they mean
give you
by
the
like,
experience.
because when you go into it, it's just like you're entering darkness. So I get what they mean, but it's also like that's a pretty big brown wall, right?
Yeah, I was gonna
there.
say a black room.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's underwhelming to me. I could use some more ambiance in that area.
Yeah.
So you go when you get on the Doom Buggies, you go through, you enter the abyss, and you go up the stairway, and you enter the first room that contains the knight's suit of armor, which in the 80s they had an actual actor dress up in a suit of armor who would jump out and scare people. So he would be standing there, And then
if
people
you're
would go by
wondering
and you'd be like, bah!
who would be the one to scream.
But that didn't last very long.
No. Probably because of people screaming.
He got really hot and tired.
Oh, yeah, that too.
But it didn't last very long. They took that out pretty quick. So now it's like a partial animatronic, which is what it always was. That sort of moves a little bit, not a lot. There's also the spooky hallway with the floating candelabrum. And the length of the room, it's supposed to be the endless hallway. The length of the room is exaggerated and extended using a mirror to make it look much deeper than it actually is.
Yeah. So cool.
Now, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, what's so creepy about a hallway? Now, if you've seen The Shining, those hallways are kind of creepy. I myself have a personal ghost story experience with a hallway, which I'll go into now. When I was in high school, my friends and I found out about this old abandoned hotel, like ski resort. Basically, it was like it was the Overlook Hotel from The Shining.
Yeah. Well, what do teenagers do when they hear about something like this? First of all.
Yeah. So we're like, oh man, a ghost house. Let's go check it out.
You're right.
So and no one knew where it was specifically. We just heard rumors. So we went around searching for it and we found it. It is the creepiest place in the world. To get to it, you have to go through like this old dirt trail. You're driving through the woods, and then you come out, and the woods open up, and you're around this corner, and there it is staring at you in the face.
Yeah.
Super creepy hotel. We went there like 5 times.
High school, or many high school kids, because I also, it was an old sanitarium place, and I went there and.
So anyway, we went into this place and it was very dilapidated, very dangerous. But we went up to where the rooms are because it was a hotel, and staring down the hallway and like all the room doors were open. Like we all walked down the hallway, and it was like one of the scariest things I've ever done, because as you're walking down this hall, you can't see into the rooms. All you know is that the doors are open. So as you walk by, your peripheral vision is picking up like, what's in this room? What's in this room? What's in this room? And I was just waiting for something terrifying to be like waiting for me. And these were like very long hallways. So I can say firsthand that sort of experience is terrifying. Into the building?
Did they just open?
I mean, the doors were all kicked in and the glass was all broken.
Other teenagers have done this before?
Well, yeah, come to find out, this is a place where like people would come like party and stuff, which we didn't know about. We just thought it was haunted. So we would like wander around it and everything. But yeah, it was very, very creepy, and it made me forever afraid of long hallways.
Yeah.
So. And
I'm heading over to the live chat again. If you're watching the replay, we do these live, and so we go to the live chat, but leave us comments in the replay. We'll respond to those as well. It says, the hotel I stayed in Ithaca, the hallway looked exactly like the hallway in The Shining, which was so creepy, yet I found it to be hilarious. Gigi, have we showed, I don't know if you have ever seen our Shining chair. Do you see this? My chair?
It's got the same, different colors, but basically the same pattern as the carpet in The Shining, which I noticed right away.
Yeah, and he told me after I'd had the chair for years.
Yeah, it took a while to mention that. Okay, where are we at? So, in the same room where the hallway and the night are at, the chair looks very similar to one of Raleigh Crump's designs, which was to be a living chair. One of the things he had designed was this chair that would like come to life and like talk, like a lot of the furniture would talk to you and stuff. So the chair, the pattern on it looks like it has like a face.
Yeah.
And this is just one of the many examples of things that show up that come from his inspiration, that come from the things that he inspired through his work, where things look like they have faces and everything looks like it's looking at you. Yeah. And it's really ominous and creepy. So from there, you go into another room where there's like a casket, and this is where you first see the Raven. And in the casket's like moving, it says like, let me out or something. And that's voiced by Atencio. You then enter a room with the cool looking wallpaper. It's like the cool like purple wallpaper with the faces on it.
Yes, you see that in a lot of merch.
Yeah, one of Raleigh Crump's designs. Really cool looking. It would be awesome to have like in a studio or something, because it looks really neat.
Someday, we don't have one yet, but someday we're going to have we each have desks, but we're going to have a proper office, and we're excited for that because when we do, we've got a ton of Disney Funko and random Disney art and figures. You know, I have a few things behind us, but we have a lot, and we'll want to do fun stuff like that in there.
So around this area comes one of my favorite subtle things. It's one of those like blink and you miss it sort of things where As you're going through, there's like an old grandfather clock, and it's spinning like out of control, and like the what do you call that? The pendulum.
Oh, there you go.
The pendulum is like a snake's tail. But that, as you're passing by there, there's a shadow that comes over that looks like this clawed hand, like coming over top of it. Really cool looking. And then you enter Madame Leota's room.
Yes, which I love Madame Leota. I love all of her stuff. Actually, I have a pin of what we're about to mention, but I love her merch. It's really cool.
Now, her likeness was based on that of Imagineer Leota Tombs. I don't know if it's Tombs or like Tombs, like a tomb, or Tombs like Tooms. I didn't look that up. But Leota Tombs, and it was voiced by Eleanor Audley, who voiced Lady Tremaine in Maleficent. So
yes,
very
fantastic voice actor. Yes, absolutely.
So Madame Leota, if you don't know, she is a disembodied
head. Should I have you go fetch more of our... No, I'm just kidding. Go get more of our stuff to show them.
She's a medium who is like this disembodied head that appears within a misty crystal ball. With blue hair.
She's green, usually. It's like a kind of a green looking.
Yeah, she summons the mansion's spirits, and the ball levitates mysteriously. It used to just sit on the table originally, but now it like levitates mysteriously above the table. The table has like tarot cards all over it, and like a wispy green spirit moves off in a corner of the room, and it floats all around.
Well, and they've updated it over the years with new technologies to make it a lot, cooler. Basically.
Now it has a... we talked about this in like the Little Mermaid ride with Sebastian and his little face and his little eyeballs. It has a mini projector inside of it that projects onto his face inside the ball to make it look very realistic. Because they used to have a problem with like a shine on the glass ball from the projector. Like a glare that would show up on it. But with this projector inside of it, it eliminates it. So now it's the most real it's ever looked ever. Which is really cool. And as you leave the seance circle, which is what they call that area, you see a large book is open on a stand, and that is the Necronomicon, or the Book of the Dead. So all my Evil Dead fans out there, you know what I'm talking about. But that's one of those attention to detail sort of things that is really cool.
And if you are an Evil Dead fan, look him up in the description box. You guys can check.
Yes. So then from there you enter the Grand Ballroom. This is the place where things really pick up. Now this is a fun thing that I did not notice any of the times I ever rode the ride, but a hearse is crashed. So as you enter it, in this corner, a hearse is like backed up through the wall, and it's open, and spirits are exiting the hearse to come in and join the party. I never saw it before. I never like realized that that's what it was.
That's what was happening, yeah.
So really cool. They're coming out of the hearse.
We notice that though a lot when we do these is that, and I think that's anybody who becomes more and more of a Disney fan. But when we do these facts and the trivia and stuff, and we really like it, I want to go on the ride. Like doing the point of views is cool, but it's like, ooh, I want to see this with a whole different new set of eyes, knowing things to look for.
Yeah, we find like lots of things we've never noticed before. This is one of them.
Yeah.
So this room utilizes the Pepper's Ghost technique in a big way. It uses 8 feet by 25 feet, or 8 foot by 25 foot panels of glass that were installed in the mansion by a crane. So giant panels of glass. It is still to this day the largest example of this technique ever being used. And one funny thing though is that the ghost dancers who were dancing on the floor, and I never noticed this either because I don't get these things, but when they got the effect all set up, because it's set up so that there's strategically placed I don't know if you call them mannequins or just models of the robot, the ghost dancing around. When they got it all set up, the way they had the dancers set up, they actually show up backwards from how they're supposed to be. So the women ghosts are leading the men in their dance. And they didn't change it because I guess it just would have been too expensive or taking too much time. So to this day, the women lead the men in the ghost dance.
I love it. It's very part of the Me Too movement, just ahead of its time, several decades there.
So also in this room, there's a pipe organ like against the far wall, and that was from the film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It used to be in Tomorrowland as part of the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea attraction, but when Tomorrowland
into the attic, and the attic is filled with all sorts of its own artifacts and really cool spooky things, each really tell their own story.
So since opening in 1969, the props in the attic have changed a lot. Lots of updates here, lots of refurbs. This is due in part to like all the updates that the Haunted Mansion has had. But
50, spanning 50 years.
Yeah. This is the August 12th of this year was my birthday of this year is the 50th anniversary of the Haunted Mansion.
And if you follow Small World Shirts Co on Instagram, we posted a picture today. They have a lot of cool stuff at Disneyland for the Haunted Mansion's 50th that you can get right now, limited edition stuff. So there's merch and there's desserts. We shared a picture of this cake that looks like it's drenched in blood, which we'll get into whose cake that is in a minute. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff right now for the 50th.
Yes, very cool. But the main reason all of the props have been changed out is because as the ride has broken down over the years, because, you know, rides break down, people hop off and they steal the props. So
hang on, I am going to just that didn't mess anything up, did it?
Nope.
Okay, all right, we're good. Never mind.
So I imagine there's some sort of like deep web black market that just sells Haunted Mansion props.
We should head on eBay
because that's like the main cause of like, oh, we got to get new props in the Haunted Mansion. Someone stole another suitcase or whatever is up there.
Can you like how and why?
Well, because you're not locked in, so like when it breaks down, people are like, and then they just grab something and hop back on. I don't know how they get it off of the ride because you think people would see them, but then
they're wearing a giant sweatshirt,
like a big trench coat.
You could get like one of those things that you wear a baby. I shouldn't be giving tips. Like, how to do this? Like, hey, let me give you a tip. No, we do
10
not.
Top tips to steal.
We
stuff
don't
from the
think you should
Haunted
do this.
Mansion.
I think it's terrible. I do not condone it at all.
Yeah. Also, don't pour your relatives' ashes in there because they vacuum.
We got into that in one of the episodes earlier this month.
Hot tip: if you don't want your relative to turn into
vacuum dust,
I guess it goes to a landfill. If you don't want your relative to end up in a landfill, don't dump their ashes in the Haunted Mansion. They will be vacuumed up. Oh, where was I?
Right here, we talked about so you're in 95, A Shadow of Piano.
Yes, so people steal props. So, in 1995...
What did you do without me?
A shadowy piano player was added to the attic. So you're going through and there's a piano that was there.
Yeah.
Now there's a shadow that plays the piano. It's a super cool effect. Basically the piano is like animatronic, I guess. And the keys move and there's a projection of a shadow where it's lined up directly so it looks like
so cool.
The fingers of the shadow are playing the piano. And it's really cool looking. It is one of my favorite effects because they just pull it off so well.
Yes. And, okay. And he's playing a darker version of the Bridal March, which is the famous, you see it in every wedding movie that you've ever seen when the bride's coming down the aisle. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Just darker.
And this leads into the bride. And I mentioned the cake that they have right now, the limited edition dessert you can get at Disneyland for the 50th. There is this really cool white cake with cream cheese, and it's got this cherry blood looking glaze, and that is supposed to be the bride's cake, the bride's wedding cake. So it leads directly into the bride, and this character has changed a lot over the years as well. And originally it was dark animatronic figure with ghostly eyes that would glow. And there were also ghosts in tuxes that would say, "I do."
Yeah, they would like pop up.
Yeah.
And be like, "I do," as you're going by. Like, "I do" to the bride. Currently though, as you cruise through the attic, you see marriage portraits. You see like portraits all around the attic. And they portray the bride, whose name is Constance Hatchaway. Hatchaway. You'll get that in a second.
Okay.
And her many husbands. But as you pass by the portraits, the heads of the husbands mysteriously disappear. Get it, Hatchaway. So she's a Black Widow, and not the cool Marvel kind. So the bride is now represented as a spirit projecting her essence onto a mannequin displaying her well-used wedding dress. So some people have like complaints about how the bride looks, like, oh, the effect looks horrible, blah, blah, blah. But it's because it's supposed to be a mannequin that holds the wedding dress, and the ghost is like projecting itself onto it, which is actually what it's actually doing.
Right. So, and to go a little further in that, it's if you're at a department store and there's a wedding dress on a bride, it's like she's looking at that mannequin dressed.
Yeah,
it's not...
she's like putting herself into the mannequin. So,
yes.
Which is why it looks a little weird. It doesn't really translate as well, like on the ride. Like you don't get it if you don't know that fact. But once you know that, yeah, it's cool. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So from there, the ride takes you to a balcony where you get to see the recently resurrected Hatbox Ghost.
Wait a minute.
Ta-da! Hatbox Ghost. So, if you don't know, the Hatbox Ghost is one of the original characters from the grand opening of the Haunted Mansion, but it was removed shortly after opening, and when I say shortly after, I mean like days after it opened, because the effect just wasn't being pulled off convincingly. It didn't work. The idea behind the Hat Ghost figure was for its head to vanish from atop its shoulders and appear in the hat box that it was holding. Show the figure.
Oh, yes.
So this area here would disappear, and then it would show back up into the little hat box he was holding. Which hat boxes aren't really a thing that we have now, so maybe it doesn't make sense.
Excuse you. I love hats. No, not hat bags.
Dusty? Oh, those are for purses.
Those are dust bags for purses. I love hats, and I would love a vintage, beautiful hat box. Sorry, I have to toss your baseball hat in one, but I love hats.
I'm just saying that they're not really a thing that people have now.
They're beautiful and classic, and I think they're wonderful. I'm bringing them back.
So, as Imagineer Chris Merritt was quoted as saying, the gag was based purely on lighting. The ghost's head was illuminated by black lighting. A light inside the hat box he held would rhythmically illuminate, and it was supposed to illuminate with beating of the bride's heart, so you would hear her beating, and then the hat box would illuminate with beating of the heart, and it would hide the head in the hat box, while in tandem, the actual head on the ghost's shoulders would be hidden by extinguishing the black lighting. Problem is, the Doom Buggies got too close to the figure, and the effect was spoiled. You could see the head, like as the face disappeared, you could still see it there, and then it would show up. It didn't work right, so they took it out right away, because they don't want anything being spoiled on this ride. But
people did, and people all through the years and still do absolutely love the Hatbox cult following. Yeah, because people saw it. People saw it there. It was on promotional artwork. They knew it existed. But because it was gone for years and years and years, we're talking basically 46 years, it was a mystery, and the lore surrounding the character grew because of that. A lot of people just questioned whether or not it even really existed because there was no real proof. Right. No one was whipping out a smartphone, taking a picture or a video of this at the time. So at some point, I don't know what year it was, but at some point pictures surfaced on the internet of the actual figure. So people were like, okay, it did exist. What happened? They figured the story out, and the Hatbox Ghost has actually been featured in a lot of like cartoons and stuff, like Disney cartoons over the years. I think it was like Mickey's the villain one that's on Netflix. Oh my gosh. When the villains take over the House of Mouse. Yes. Apparently if you know it, leave it in the comments. On that episode. Yeah. In like the background or something, so they were aware of it being like a cult following, and they would like plug him into like certain places. I'm gonna look that up. Hold on, you could do the next one, so I'm gonna look that up really quick on Netflix. So in 2015, though, the Hatbox Ghost made its grand return to the Haunted Mansion, and it can still be seen there today. We got this figure. I'm trying to think. I want to say 2017 because we were getting these really cool. We love them. These Disney Funko boxes, and that's because the Hatbox Ghost already had that cult following, and then the resurgence after he was back was just huge. People love. That was actually the first time I heard about it, because that came with like a little like map thing with the description, so it had like a brief history, and I was like, oh no way, and then I looked up more, and I was like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, but he's back now. The effect is not as simple as it originally was. It's very complicated now the way it works. But it looks really cool, so definitely a neat. Yeah, Mickey's House of Villains. House of Villains. That's it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's in there, and a few other ones that I didn't care to memorize. But if you Google it, you will find it. So from there, you leave and you enter the graveyard scene. Now, as you first enter the graveyard, you see the gravedigger and his dog, and those are the only two living people in the entire ride. Something about that dog, I don't know what it is, terrified me as a child. I have this weird long history of ghost dogs scaring me. I don't know why,
But when I was a little kid, I remember checking a book out from the library that was like ghost stories or something, and there was a story in there about a ghost dog, and something about it just like hit a
Gave you
primal
those
fear
heebie-jeebies, yeah.
and scared the poo out of me. I was terrified of it. I don't even know why. It wasn't like
Family-friendly content.
it was just like someone saw a ghost dog in a field and they're like, "Oh, ghost dog." And something about that story just scared the life out of me. And so when I first was on this ride and saw this like malnourished dog with its like rib cage showing, it just terrified me. I was like, that's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And I don't know why. It's just something about it just hits a nerve. So as you enter the graveyard, you see the gravedigger and his dog. Um, Now this scene was too large and intricate to implement any sort of like Pepper's ghost technique. So instead, what they did is the ghosts are like these fully formed animatronic figures, and their skin is like either like see-through plastic or it's like painted green with like black light on it. And the clothing that they wear is basically just like clear like vinyl, like it's all just made of like clear material, so you can see through it to give that like transparent effect. So when combined with the right lighting, i.e. black lights and like lit in the right way, it looks like they're a corporeal sort of being. Now there's a lot going on in this part of the ride.
Yes.
I basically just copy and pasted this out of Wikipedia because I didn't want to type each one out individually. So there's like a ghostly band of minstrels playing a jazzy rendition of Grim Grinning Ghosts. A family of cats and a pair of owls are like joining in singing. Ghouls pop up from behind tombstones. There's a king and queen balancing on a teeter-totter. There's a couple of hellhounds, like skeleton dogs, howling from behind. The Doom Buggies travel down a hill and turn to see 5 singing bus. Now, this is when you see this famous singing bus. Oh, but hold on, I missed a few things.
Barbershop Harmony.
Yeah, they're singing a barbershop harmony, but you see a ghostly tea party that's surrounding a hearse that's stuck in the mud. A bony arm comes up from a crypt and with a wine glass in its hand, while a banshee rides bicycles in the distance, which I saw a picture of this. I'm not sure if it's the same thing, but it was like ghosts riding bikes around a tree. I don't know if that's the effect they use. I didn't actually like make the connection here, but it looked really cool. There's an Egyptian mummy that sits up in its sarcophagus, holding a cup of tea and singing along with the song. And there's a ghost of a wise old man with a Renaissance period ear trumpet that he holds to his ear and attempt to make out what the mummy is saying. So then you turn the corner, you see the famous singing bus. They sing a fun ragtime version of Grim Grinning Ghosts, and despite popular belief, none of these busts are a representation of Walt Disney. They are actually representations of Vern Rowe, Thurl Ravenscroft, Chuck Schroeder, Jay Meyer, and Bob Ebright. Many people believe that the Thurl Ravenscroft, which that's the spookiest name I've ever heard, is the bust of Walt because they look sort of similar. They both have that like pencil mustache thing going on. And the faces are sort of distorted on the bust, so I could see how you could make that out. So some people believe that that's Walt. It's not. It's Thurl Ravenscroft.
Yeah.
Walt is not in the ride.
He's not, no. For a fun fact, many of the ghosts on this part of the ride are actually recycled molds, which I thought was pretty neat. So from other rides like Pirates of the Caribbean and Carousel of Progress, they took the molds from those rides and then used them, which again, we talk about this a lot.
They recycle things all the time.
Yes.
Anywhere they can cut a cost and still make something work, they do it. And here, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? You already have the molds. Like, don't make up new ones. Just copy and paste. So they did that, and you can actually notice the differences if you pay attention to them from ride to ride. Okay, so from here you go through, and then you are warned to beware of the hitchhiking ghosts. So you see the 3 famous hitchhiking ghosts, and then you pass in front of a bunch of large mirrors. There's like 3 of them, and you see your reflection along with a ghost who has joined the ride.
Yeah, ghost riding along with you.
Which is fun. And now I remember this when I was a kid because I remember it was the original setup where as you go through, the ghosts just kind of ride. Because basically what it is it's not an actual mirror. It is a mirror, but it's a pane of glass and it's lit in a way that reflects you. But then you can also see through it, so you see the ghost. So on the other side, it's a rotating like oval of ghost busts that would like it was timed in a way where it would move along with the Doom Buggies,
Yeah.
so you could see yourself riding with the ghost. Now it is like an animated thing, and I didn't actually look into like how it's done, but instead of just a stationary bust, it's like a projection that like the ghost is like with you and moving. Because I remember when we went on it last time, it was like.
Which we have to tell that story. I mean, go ahead, but we have to tell that story too.
Yeah, but like the ghost that was in our buggy was like it turned like a balloon and like went away or something. So it was something like that.
The last time that we were on the ride, we had all three of our kids with us, and Haley had fallen asleep. We were there for Mickey's Very Merry Christmas party, and Haley, our daughter, had fallen asleep. And we thought, okay, well, we really want to go on this ride. Perfect time. There's, I mean, hardly any line. There's, during the party, we'll go on. We walked right on, and it was fine. Well, then poor girl, she woke up in the middle of the ride. So, you're in nice sleep. You've had your belly filled with cookies and treats.
It's like as we were entering the graveyard, she woke up.
Yeah. So that was, poor girl. We scarred her a little bit there.
So another fun fact about the mirror scene is that originally it wasn't supposed to be like that at all. What they were trying to pull off is that you would go in front of these mirrors and you would see the Doom Buggy, but your reflection wouldn't be there. You would just see the ghost riding in it. But no matter how they lit it, they couldn't get rid of you. So it just didn't work. So they just
I think it's fun to be with you.
Yeah, I mean, it worked out. Like, it worked out the way it is. And I honestly, these days, they probably could make it happen, but I wouldn't even want them to because it's fun to see the ghost sitting in there with you. And now as you're going through, like, you get a picture of, like, you with the ghost sitting in you, with you in there or something. I don't know. We didn't get one, but it's a cool idea. So from there, you enter the unloading area, and you pass by Little Leota, which is the little Madame Leota little finger thing as you're walking out, and then you enter back into the park, and the ride is over.
That's it.
And that's it. That's the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
From beginning to end.
Beginning to end, Haunted Mansion. We want to know what parks you've seen it on, and how it ranks for you. But
final notes here. Yeah. So the Haunted Mansion.
You wrote this beautifully. Read it.
Yeah, the Haunted Mansion, like Pirates of the Caribbean, is one of those rides that has so deeply penetrated our cultural psyche that it now epitomizes the concept of what it was supposed to represent. So it started out as a haunted house. It's like, oh, here, we're going to make a haunted house. Now it is the haunted house.
It is the haunted house.
When you think of a haunted place, you think of everything that's in this ride. You think of the exterior, you think of the ghost, you think of the style of music that's in there, the cobwebs, the way everything looks. Like, this is the haunted house.
And it's another one that even if you don't know the ride, even if you don't like the ride, you get references. We've talked about this with Pirates again. There's a lot of crossover with those two rides. You know things and references that are from the ride. Like, even if you're not familiar with the ride. So.
Yeah, it is the haunted house now. It's the perfect representation of it. And when you think of it and when you like try to make a haunted house, that's what you're making. Like, they nailed it in every perfect possible way.
Yeah.
And what does Gigi say here? Random, but just asking, is the movie The Goonies a Disney movie? Because that would be a totally awesome ride if done right. What do you guys think? The Goonies is not a Disney property.
No.
I think Warner Brothers owns the Goonies.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg was the producer. Let me see.
Was it TriStar originally?
Warner Brothers is distributor.
Yeah.
Yes,
so Warner Brothers owns that.
We are big Goonies fans as well.
Yes.
So I totally hear you, Gigi. That's a great one. But yes, please always leave us if you have a ride, attraction, anything in the Disney parks, even a system. Like, we've talked a lot about the different things that they use to make all these things possible. We'd love to do that. So let us know, because we want to do what you guys would like to see. And we want to thank the liveplace.com for hosting. That is Dean, and he is our friend. He's a really wonderful person, and he hosts the liveplace.com. It's a website, and on that website, you can see all different live streamers and there's a lot of Disney content and family-friendly content on there, and we're happy that he streams us on there. So thank you so much to him. He's always so kind and good to us. And we want to thank you for watching and participating. Gigi, thank you so much for commenting tonight live. And if you are commenting on the replay, thank you very much. We will respond. One of us will respond to you on there.
Yes. So that is the end of Spooky October. Tomorrow's Halloween. We're going to be trick-or-treating.
Yes.
And that is the end of all of the spooky scariness, which I enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad it's over because searching for spooky stuff in Disneyland and World and everywhere else is difficult because there's not a lot of it.
But let us know what you'd like to see coming into November, coming into December, and depending...
Yes, give us ideas,
Yes,
please.
ideas, and depending on how things go, we do want to do some shirts, so make sure to check out smallworldshirtsco.com. It's linked in the description box.
Yes.
And the Instagram where you can find Stefan is...
Small World Shirts Co.
Yep, and I am LeahTackles, so you can check out, and that is also where we will update if there are changes to the lives, which I don't think there will be anytime super soon, but with holidays and things like that coming up, there could be, or if one of us has something going on for work. So we'll always keep you guys posted, but we always go live once each week, usually on Thursdays at 8 p.m. And thank you guys so much for watching. It was fun. We were excited, well, especially this one right here. Yeah. Very excited, worked very hard on this one. So.
And the old rides are always the fun ones to do because there's just so much to get into, and the way they come up with things is like super creative and awesome. It's not like, well, they just farmed it out to some sort of production house and then they came up with the idea because it's 2019 and everything's possible now.
Yes. And before we sign off, I do want to say, because I know we teased this before and I don't think we ever said, we are doing a Disney theme. We got a couple questions about that for Halloween costumes. I am going to be Jessie.
I'm Buzz Lightyear.
Our middle son is going to be Woody. Our daughter is going to be Bo Peep, Toy Story 4 version Bo Peep. And our youngest is going to be Forky. And I don't know if I hold up a picture, it'll show.
Yeah, it'll show.
Yes. So we already dressed up in our costumes, which is how I can of course show you a picture, because we went to a Halloween party in like a neighborhood Halloween party. Oh wait. Oh, there we go, Leah.
There you go. So,
yeah, kind of. You can see our silhouettes.
Sort of, not really.
Anyhow, it's a lot of fun, and let us know if you are dressing up and what you are being, and if it's Disney related, let us know.
Yes.
And if it's not, let us know.
That too.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a magical day.
This is Halloween.
Halloween.